Can I ask you, when did you first realise you were gay?
I probably realised when I left college.
At what age?
Around the age of 22, before I came back in to do a postgrad here in Pats in education. But it still took me probably another 6 years maybe to deal with. So I left college. I came into Pats in 2002. I left in 2005. So between 2005 and 2011, there was that internal struggle in myself, to accept the type of person I was, to accept who I was, and to accept, that other people might see me as different. And it's a really difficult struggle internally. But I finally coped with it, and then in 2011, January 2011, I took the step to start telling members of my family and then afterwards my friends.
I'm going to come to the trigger of why and when you decided to tell people, but can you explain that struggle that you're talking about of trying to deal with it and accept it, as the word you used?
Yeah, it's a really difficult thing to explain to people who've never gone through it. There's this inbuilt fear in you that you're going to let people down for some reason, that you should be ashamed of who you are, that for some reason people are going to see you and treat you differently. And that's not the case. As soon as you take that step into what is the unknown, the weight that's lifted off you is huge. I drove myself into work, into refereeing, into sport, into tennis, to keep myself busy and my mind active, to stop thinking about it. And the worst part for me was driving. Driving was the one time when I felt that I had time to think. And sitting in the drive home from my house in Dublin down to Slane was about 45 minutes to an hour. And it was the worst hour every week. It was like someone had a belt around my chest and they were tightening the belt. The stress was huge and I just couldn't bear it anymore. In January 2011, I just decided that this had to be the end of it. I couldn't live with myself anymore. And once I took that step, just the weight lifted and my life moved on.
So what's going through your mind that you get so stressed out about these things? Is it the idea of just finally being exposed, or is it the idea of how people would react, or what was it?
It's how people would react, how particularly your close family, your parents and your siblings, and what perception people are now going to have of you because they know something personal about you that they never knew before. But for me, I found as soon as I told people, they were totally fine with it. They just said, well, you're still the same person you always were to us, so it makes no difference to us whatsoever. And that's a huge relief and a great source of comfort to find as just a newly open gay man. And my family, my friends, my work colleagues, they were just abundant in their support. They were fantastic.
So just to rewind the clock a little bit, throughout your adolescent years, so you said it was around 21 when you started to realise it. Throughout your adolescent years, when the sexual awakening is happening, where's your head at? And surely you had some suspicions.
Not really. I was in a college here that was predominantly female. I was enjoying my time here in college. Nights out were great fun. Was hanging around with all the lads I played football with and the girls here in college. There was never any issue. But it was only when I started to my life to slow down and take a break, that's when the suspicions really started to manifest themselves.
So I mean, this could be an overly intrusive question, then feel free not to answer it, but so then would you have lived life as a straight man and been with women up until that point?
Up until that point, yes. Yeah.
So what was the turning point for you to go, do you know what, I'm a gay man?
I don't know whether there was an initial turning point, but it was just, I suppose, maybe on a night out, with maybe a few too many drinks, allowing myself to do something that I would never have done before, and then just feeling comfortable in doing it, which took its own time for that to happen as well. But I couldn't say there was an actual turning point for me. I couldn't, pin it down to one specific example.
So during that period where you said you would have been concealing it, I'm not sure if in the closet is a term that you would rail against, or if it's something that's okay to say. But would you have felt that, going on a night out, that you were holding back your real personality, or you were holding back part of yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. For a number of years, I was very comfortable in concealing that, going out with my friends. I found it really difficult going to nightclubs with them, and they were all talking about women in the nightclubs and who they fancied, and I was expected to buy into that, and make my own comments, and I found that really difficult. But also after a while, I found myself completely comfortable in doing it because I had done it for so long. But the waking up the next morning was, hard, that you had to go through that to experience and enjoy a night out with your own friends, that you couldn't be who you wanted to be around them.
And so did you feel a little bit like you were lying to people?
Absolutely, and I was lying. There's no point in saying I wasn't, but I was lying because I wasn't willing to accept it myself. I wasn't able to accept it myself, and it was much easier to live the lie than face up to the truth at that time.
So would you have ever wished or thought it would be so much easier if I was straight?
No, I wouldn't wish or think that. My life certainly at the time would have been an awful lot easier if I had been straight, but that's because society has this image of what normal is. I don't see myself as abnormal, I just see myself as every bit as unextraordinary as everyone else. But my life is a wonderful life, and I have gone on that journey of discovery, and I'm now totally comfortable with the person I am. I know who I am, and I know who I stand for, and I'm glad I had that opportunity. Maybe an awful lot of straight people don't have that opportunity, but I certainly have travelled my journey, and I'm quite happy with the person I am now today.
And besides going out in a social environment, is there any other ways you would have had to hold yourself back, maybe in front of family, in front of friends, just normal day to day?
Not really that I can think of. Maybe some of my fashion choices down the years might have caused...
Such as?
I won't say, but might have caused my mother to turn her head every now and again. But no, I was always allowed be myself among my family. And I suppose they never really realise, because when you're so close to someone and you see them every day, you don't see them as any different than you've ever seen them. So they wouldn't have picked up on any cues at all. 2 friends I lost over it, that weren't happy with the situation about being gay. Their friends, I suppose, are they truly your friends if that's their belief and their outlook? And now that they know something personal about you that they never knew before. And so I did lose a certain number of friends, and that's regrettable. But, I made so many more on my new journey. So, I'm quite happy that I had the opportunity to tell people.
And is it a sense that, a relief that finally I can just be myself?
Yeah, there's a huge sense of relief that you don't have to watch yourself anymore to see, if you're giving away something, if it's a way you stand, or a way you look at someone, or a lingering glance, or even the fear of walking down to Capel Street and turning into Panty Bar instead of the Boar's Head. Did someone see you going into Panty Bar? And that they're very real fears, but I don't have to worry about those anymore, and that's a huge relief, for anyone.
And what is the social scene like for a gay man in Dublin and in Ireland?
It's quite small. It's not something I regularly attend because of my lifestyle with matches. I don't get to socialise that often. A lot of my socialising might be around going into town for cinema, play, theatre, musical, stuff that I enjoy. I don't generally get to go out a lot because of the matches. I do enjoy a night out on a Sunday night. I might go to the bingo in the George if I feel up to it with a couple of friends, but only if I've friends to go with. I'd never go out on my own. And maybe even a drink on a Sunday evening in Panty Bar. But it's not somewhere I frequent very often. It's a very small community. The same people you see one week are the same people you're going to see for weeks on end afterwards. But it's a happy community in Dublin, and it's now a very well respected and well looked after community.
Yeah, so in preparation for this interview, I spoke with a gay man, a friend of mine from Roscommon, and he said that he never had a problem being gay, but it's like yourself, being from a smaller town in a more rural area and afraid of what people would think, and the idea of being talked about. But in Dublin there are so many different cultures and personalities and backgrounds that no one really cares anymore. So is it a case just being in Dublin even makes it easier? Yeah,
definitely being in Dublin makes it easier because you're a little bit more anonymous in a big city like this, and it's much easier than being at home. in the village at home, I suppose my family will be well known for a long time. Myself and my brother played football for the club for all our lives, and we will be well known in the village. So that was difficult, I suppose, for me at home. I know our village and our area barely passed the marriage equality referendum, just by a small percentage, over 50, when the results were released. And I know some people in the community found it difficult to speak to me as a result of wearing the wristband in Croke Park. But you know, they came round to the idea as well, and saw that I was no different than I ever was before. But certainly it's a little bit more difficult in small community in rural Ireland.
And how do you feel about modern Ireland in terms of embracing being openly gay? You know, obviously we've got Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, who's openly gay, and the fact that we passed the marriage referendum. Are you satisfied with where this country's at?
I am, from a personal viewpoint. I am. I suppose we have other strides to make in transgender and other areas as that, but they will come in their own time. But we've taken a huge step in 2015. We're never going to look back, and I think the country, you know, they didn't just, you know, pass it. They roared back to everyone, you know, worldwide, that we are an open community here in Ireland, and we're fully supportive of the LGBT community.
And then actually just looking at Australia, who just passed the referendum as well, it was interesting that in the past, Israel Folau, the rugby player for Australia, he came out not supporting gay marriage, and you did a quote tweet of his and said you'd wrongly assumed that some sports stars would have enough life experience to open their eyes and minds. Yeah,
I'm delighted waking up to the news this morning of the 61% that came out in the postal vote in Australia. It's huge news, and I suppose they would have watched us and how events unfurled here in 2015. I was really disappointed with Israel as a sports star. I suppose everyone is entitled to their opinion. I was just disappointed that someone with such vast experience, who would have travelled the world, met so many different personalities on and off the field, as sporting stars, and I suppose within media and fans, that his mind couldn't have been opened to support something, you know, that it's just equality. I mean, love is love.
And then it's interesting that a man who would referee a lot of his games, I presume, Nigel Owens, he seems to be someone that you very much connect with, and you've tweeted about him a number of times, and in March 2015 you said you'd like to meet him someday.
Yeah, we follow each other on Twitter, so there's one for AIB, the toughest. If you want someone the toughest trade, myself and Nigel would be up for that. Yeah, he's a huge inspiration for me. I mean, as a gay man and as a referee, to be at the pinnacle of your sport. He is rugby's greatest refereeing or officiating personality and top match official, and to do all that, you know, with the backdrop of being an openly gay man in such a male dominated sport is fantastic, and it gives me a huge sense of pride first of all, but certainly inspiration that, you know, I could follow in his footsteps in my own code.
So the GAA would be considered a pretty macho world as well. Does being a gay man fit in?
I think I fit in fine. I don't know what other people within the GAA might think about me, but I am who I am. I feel that I fit in fine, and I'm well integrated into various different levels of GAA society, so I don't see any issue with it at all.
But the fact that you're pretty much you are the only openly gay referee. I know Donald Cusack and Conor Cusack came out in the past, but it's not something that we see a lot. But you'd imagine, like, do you think there are a lot of gay people involved in GAA that are
yeah, there has to be. Like, I mean, the stats just don't add up. Yeah. But as I said, I know the very difficult and personal journey I had to go on to get there, and I'm sure different people are on different paths in that journey, and whether they decide to take that step is each to their own. I know for me, one of the most difficult things was telling my teammates at home in Slane. I stopped playing club football for a while as a result, but they were so supportive, you know, when they found out, and they just said, Davey, look, you're no different than you ever were before. We want you back playing.
Why did you stop?
There's just that perception around myself, what my perception of what their thoughts about me, you know, was it going to change? Was there going to be issues in the changing room? And
just in terms of people taking off clothes.
Exactly,
and stuff like that?
And I just didn't know how they were going to take to that. It's no different, like, than being in any changing room, but it was just a fear, and an irrational fear, but it was something that manifested itself in myself.
So just back to the perceived machiness of the GAA world, and is it down to everyone has that personal journey to get to the point of where they're going to be openly gay, if they are that way, or is there possibly a bit of a barrier there that are stopping people coming out because they're in the GAA world? I
don't know, because I would have been fearful in my own time, and there would have been certain barriers for me. Inter-county players and their setups are completely different to the setup we have in Croke Park, and I don't know what barriers they would face. Certainly there is an acceptance that a referee will get a certain amount of flack from fans on both sides. A player opening himself up to a certain amount of flack from opposition supporters because of one particular part of his personal life. Is that wise for a player to do? Maybe not, I don't know. But I'd like to think that Ireland has moved on as a community, that the fans have moved on as a community, and that they will be more welcoming of what would be a role model in Irish society if it ever does happen.
So you were already established as an inter-county referee at the time when you came out. Did any attitudes change towards you?
I don't know whether attitudes changed towards me, but people certainly knew something very different about me than they ever knew before. I don't think people treated me any differently. People may have hidden their own ideas or agendas and kept their counsel to themselves. But certainly it never manifested itself, in the boardrooms in Croke Park when I was present.
So no negative attitudes towards
No negative.
Okay. So there was it was a big thing at the time that you were planning on wearing the rainbow wristband to support the marriage equality vote in 2015 for that Dublin and Tyrone League game. You initially got permission to wear it, but then at the 11th hour the GAA said it did not allow political statements. And you were quoted at the time as saying, "I was told flatly that I could not do it. I'm disappointed, dismayed, and I feel, and all gay members of the association have been let down." Or that you and all the members have been let down. Where are you at with that?
I'm okay with it now. I wouldn't have known the GAA's apolitical stance at the time.
Do you buy it?
If I don't buy it as a referee, and I'm supposed to uphold the rules of the association, who does? And that's what I'd say. It was difficult for me to take at the time. I had spent almost 2 weeks since the appointment came out planning this with a PR consultant, contacting the Irish Independent and John Green in the sports section of the Irish Independent at the time. And everything was positive. I had to go to my board of management in school because I was now opening up a huge can of worms. I was working in a Catholic school while not adhering to the Catholic ethos of the school, so working, I suppose, against the ethos of the school. I told them of my plans and they were fully supportive. My board of management, my school community and the parish in Terranure were fantastic, my principal and my fellow teachers. But on the Saturday morning to get that phone call was hugely difficult because the interviews had already been done, the photographs had been taken for the newspaper, the articles had been written, and it really was taken out of my hands. We had agreed with the Independent that they wouldn't publish the story until after the throw-up, that I didn't want any fallout before the game. I had a huge game with Dublin and Tyrone to deal with, and that was my main focus. So whatever happened between 11 a.m. that morning when the Independent were told and 7 o'clock before I threw up the ball was out of my hands. I was not in any contact with anyone. I had a game to prepare for.
Were you aware of it?
I was aware
that
of
had
it.
been pulled.
I was aware of it because the GAA had rang at 7 o'clock that morning to tell me that I couldn't wear it. So I rang Eddie McGuinness, who was my PR consultant at the time, and Eddie dealt with the fallout and dealt with the media. But the whole focus for me was on the game, and that was agreed that I wouldn't have anything to do with it. So I didn't know what story was going to break on Saturday evening. And I remember going up to my friend's house just off Parnell Square that night and staying with him because I didn't want to stay at home alone. And we woke up the next morning and it was the front page of the the Sunday Independent, and my friend's a huge Marion Finucane fan, and he's a picture in his house of himself getting a book autographed by Marion Finucane, her autobiography. And I was lying on his sofa a little bit worse for wear the next morning when Marion Finucane rang for me to be on his radio show. And it was just that surreal moment where I was sitting on his sofa looking at this photograph of himself and Marion while being on the radio talking to Marion. That one was a wonderful moment. It was a great memory for me.
But, you know, you kind of have to go back to the game itself and being told you couldn't wear the rainbow wristband. I mean, as much as you kind of have to adhere to the apolitical stance, it's got to be kind of true gritted teeth.
It was true gritted teeth, yeah. It was really, really disappointing. I still don't see an issue with it. I mean, I was wearing it to highlight a certain cause and to bring the discussion to the GAA tables of families around the country that might not have discussed it before, and to have someone within the GAA make such a public stance was going to open up those forums all around the country. And I mean, I knew if I wore it I was going to be sanctioned, that they might pull me from matches in the future, they might drop me from the panel. But I felt really aggrieved over time when I found out that players made their own personal stances by wearing badges or different items during matches, and they were supported by their own county boards and their own management for the stance they took. And that was difficult for me to take, because these were straight men making their statements in support of the gay community, where I was a gay man trying to support my own community, and I wasn't supported by the association I was representing.
Recently Conor McGregor used the word faggot. Were you offended by that?
I don't know the man, so to say I'd be offended by it would be a bit rich. It was an unfortunate choice of words. He should know better as a role model in Irish society, more than Irish society but worldwide society, to so many young people and fans in his own code, that he shouldn't use language like that. I wasn't offended by it, but I certainly felt a little bit let down that he felt comfortable in himself to use language like that.
Do you think it makes it harder for people that are
Absolutely. Every time you hear it, it just chips away at you that little bit more. And certainly when I was in that stage of 5 or 6 years of trying to decide to come out, every time there was a joke told in the pub, or every time a comment was made or a derogatory term was made towards someone in the LGBT community, it grated on me that little bit more, and it just made me doubt whether I wanted to take that step and face up to these people in the future.
I'd imagine people are more careful of how
Way
they use
more
their words.
careful about how they use the words around me now. But I wouldn't say it detracts from the sort of dressing room humour that still goes on. I mean, the referees in particular have a great sense of humour, and you know they use their one-liners and bits and pieces, and we all get a great laugh out of it, you know. But it's never meant in a hurtful or derogatory way. It's humorous, and the world would be a very boring place without a little bit of humour.
Mm-hmm. So in the right environment and with people you're friendly with, a lot of these terms might be thrown around just for the crack in a private atmosphere.
In a very private atmosphere where I feel comfortable, that is fine, but I certainly wouldn't condone language being used like that in a very public domain.
So just going back to before you had come out, do you find that people say these things all the time, the stuff that makes it more difficult to come out?
Certainly when I was starting to come out, I don't know whether I had a greater heightened awareness of the language and the type of humour that was being used, but I certainly felt I heard an awful lot more of it around the dressing rooms, around the college, and around my own social circles and friends out at weekends. That just made it that little bit more difficult to face up to the reality.
Like, you're now part of DCU St. Pat's, but has being gay ever impacted your career as a teacher in any way?
No, it never impacted my career. I was very fortunate, as I've said already, to have a wonderful board of management in school. My principal was from Cork. He couldn't have been any better. And now I'm employed by Leinster Council and the GAA to work as an education and games development officer here in St. Pat's campus of DCU, and that is a partnership between DCU, the GAA and Leinster Council, and they're all equal opportunities employers, so I was never held back in any shape or form. And the fact that I actually got the job, you know, there was 85, I believe, different people applied for that post. just shows, you know, how open the GAA are to employing people from the LGBT community.
Sure, not everyone would have agreed to an interview like this, and you've spoken so openly. Is there anything that you'd like, a message that you'd like to get out there, just to sum it up?
Just to the young people from the GAA community going forward, you know, that sport can be a fantastic community, and the GAA can be a fantastic community to grow up in. But just to allow yourself to become the person you were always destined to become, not to let anything hold you back or anything to get in your way. That Ireland now is a wonderful country, a very welcoming country, and that people should now feel, you know, free and at ease with the type of person they are, and just to grow into themselves, and certainly within the GAA community going forward.